People who work in human resources, what's the most awkward or uncomfortable discussion you've ever had to have with an employee? I was a manager in a call center and I had this really nice old lady working for me. Her name was Madge and she was very large, both tall and heavy. She had had a stroke, leaving one arm hanging since it partially paralyzed the one side of her body. Now, Madge sounds great and all, and she was really nice, but she was also a hoarder. Her desk was filled to the brim with nonsense, from decorations for every conceivable holiday to food items. It covered every inch of her desk and the bins and drawers below. It was just so unsightly. So I began to ask her to take things home, and of course she smiled and did so. But despite her taking small bags home, the mess never went away completely. Cut to a few weeks later, Madge is out of the office sick and we are moving desks around, so of course, to prevent the possible claim of theft by others, I clean her desk. It was a freaking nightmare. There were gummy bears stuck to the bottom of drawers, there were expired food products all over the place, things loaded in preservatives that I don't think could spoil like that. The worst part was when I was cleaning out the top drawer, I put my hand in the back to just bring everything to the front, and my middle finger sank into something. I gagged and pulled my hand out to find my finger stuck in one of those little butter containers from a restaurant. It had been partially opened, it seemed, and my finger was stuck in the oily remnants of what was left. Needless to say, I packed what I considered non-essentials into 2 big boxes and moved the rest to her new desk. I also threw away 3 large garbage bags of spoiled food and other BS. So when she came back, I immediately pulled her into the office and explained what I had done. I told her that I would personally place the 2 boxes into her car since she couldn't really lift things, but that she could not bring anything else into the office. I also had to write her up since her spoiled food had attracted mice and bugs alike. Madge grossed me out after that and was shocked when I wouldn't let her touch my belly later when I was pregnant. Imagine yelling at a 70-year-old later not to touch you. Hoarders are nasty. Another one, a really weird lady, got hired at my call center. We had our own desks, and a year into our job, they started remodeling, so we were doing a lot of desk moving and sharing. We heard a girl scream and start gagging. HR was called. She was rushed away. Turns out she had to sit at the weird lady's desk that day, and the weird lady had been collecting a year's worth of boogers under her desk and keyboard tray. A clump of bugs fell on her lap as it came unglued from under the keyboard tray. HR pulled a weird lady in to discuss her habits. Ugh, yuck. A clump of boogers that I've yet to see and never want to see for the rest of my life. Phrase of the day though, clump of bugs. Story 2. I work in IT and for whatever reason, I always end up being the go-to for HR. Current job has to do with geography. At my last job, I was one of 2 guys in IT but was the only one who knew what he was doing. Our safety director resigned and came back 60 days later. After his resignation, they hired someone who had experience to fill the role, but the guy was a total jerk. He hated IT because, in his words, we're obnoxious commies who filtered the internet and spent time spying on his activity. Of course, this is a red flag when someone in IT has a user complain about us spying on them. We weren't, but the people who complain the most are usually the ones doing something they shouldn't be anyway. While looking for a place to live, he was staying in a small hunting lodge owned by the company. One night, he went out in a company vehicle and ran a stop sign and T-boned a police car. The CEO informed him he would need to be illicit substance tested as the accident occurred using a company vehicle. He refused and they fired him. This was at 6 p.m. At 7 p.m., I got called asking to meet the CEO and a couple of police officers at the hunting lodge. They proceeded to find a small collection of pills and snow on the kitchen table and requested me to go through his company-issued phone and laptop since I had previously mentioned him acting suspicious. But of course, screw the IT guy when he suggests and reports suspicious activity. Wait until the stuff hits the fan and drag him away after hours. His phone and company email were filled with messages from his ex-wife and 2 other women, all of whom were working together to locate him as he owed all child support. He had also been using the phone to send photos to various women through dating sites, and text to the safety office's receptionist and a few to his hookup to come by as he had money and needed his fix. He had also been trying to find software to bypass our web filters and had heavily infected the PC. He also had an outrageous collection on his company laptop, you know what I mean. And the entire time I'm going through this, the woman who ran HR, a nice middle aged woman, had to report on all I found on his laptop, so she got to sit through and see plenty of websites, vile messages, and close ups of his junk. Of course, the company did zero background checks on him and took his resume at face value. Our CFO hired him, and our CFO was an idiot. To end this, his phone for weeks was in my office, constantly going off with texts from the three women and a few others who had located him. Naturally, our CFO wanted to just reassign the phone, and it devolved into an argument over how we simply could not use this number anymore, as whomever had the phone would be slammed with phone calls and text messages from the guy's ex-wife. Yikes, poor woman in HR who had to endure the tragedies of that man's marital problems and whatever else was going on with his life. And it also makes you wonder now, if you get a company phone yourself, what nasty tidbits had to be removed from it before that phone was assigned to you? Story 3. In college, I was a manager at a job that employed primarily high school kids. One woman, let's call her Jessica, said that she saw another employee, a male, let's call him Steven, steal $20 from a till. Myself and another manager called him into the office, and the other manager asked if he knew why we called him in. He said yes, it was because of what happened with Jessica. The other manager said that was right, and because of what happened, we were going to fire him, but if he wanted to write down his version of events for his employment file, we would take it, common practice on terminations at the company I worked for. He spent maybe 10 minutes writing, and when he was done, he handed me the paper. As the other manager began giving him the details of what the end of his employment would mean, future shifts, how to get his last checks, he was not welcome back even as a customer, blah blah blah. I read what he wrote. When I skimmed it, he didn't even write one word about taking money from a till. He wrote about how he and Jessica were in the storage room smoking grass during one of their shifts, and he tried to kiss her, but she pushed him away, so he left and had not spoken to her since. I interrupted the other manager and asked her to speak briefly with me in an adjacent office. We asked Steven to wait while we talked. Well, we determined that if what Steven said was true, we needed to know because A, it's not stealing from the company, so we needed to clear that up. And B, if Jessica was alone doing illegal substances on the property, we needed to know that as well and deal with her accordingly. So we went back to the office Steven was in and told him that his version of events did not match the information we had been given, and before we actually terminated him, we would investigate further. However, he was told not to smoke on the job anymore and to go back to work until we figured out what happened. He left, later, as in after we had double-checked Steven's till and determined that $20 was not missing. We had checked earlier but apparently miscounted because this time the till came up even. We called Jessica back into the office and I told her that her first tale didn't make sense, and we checked Steven's drawer and no money was missing. Jessica interrupted me and said she knew but she didn't want to tell us the real story. I said that we needed to know the real story because Steven told us something else, so now we just need to know what happened. She started racing through a story about how Steven cornered her in the storage room and tried to get physical with her. The other manager, a woman, interrupted and said we would need more info if that was her claim. Jessica said Steven pushed her up against a wall, tried to kiss her, grabbed her chest, and grabbed at and ripped her strap. The manager asked how her strap got out, and Jessica said Steven pulled it out while she was still wearing her work pants. No bareness, this becomes important later. The other manager told her to write all that down and we would continue investigating. She left, we called Steven back in and said that Jessica had told us more had happened in the storage room, and again, we needed to know the truth. Steven said he knew he lied before, but he would tell the truth this time. The other manager had him write everything down again. This time, he wrote a story about how Jessica called him into the storage room to smoke. He went, and while they shared it, she started going bare and tried to get him to sleep with her. He claimed he rejected her because he was dating someone else and she was trying to get back at him, which is why this all started. The other manager read the story and said that this didn't match the information we had. Steven then said he had proof. Before I could say anything, the other manager said, "What proof?" Steven then proceeded to take out a woman's strap out of his pocket. The other manager said to him basically that he had now admitted twice to using substances on company property, so he was done and we fired him. We then called Jessica back in to confront her with what Steven said. The strap was fully intact, contradicting Jessica's story. The other manager asked Jessica to verify that the strap was hers, and Jessica did. And she said that Jessica had to tell us how Steven ended up with it. Jessica tried to retell her attack story, but she couldn't explain how he had gotten it intact if she hadn't given it to him, so she was terminated too for her actions at work. We never could figure out for sure if substances were actually involved, precisely how Stephen came to be in possession of Jessica's strap, or exactly what happened in the storage room, but 2 people got fired that day. Holy bejesus, there were so many, okay, I lied, so here's what really happened moments in the story. It's like a witness's testimony in a Phoenix Wright game. What a circus, but at least this guy walked away with a good story to tell at the pub. In my defense, Jessica gets crazy when she smokes. It's not my fault she can't handle her grass. Alright, anyway, so if you're liking the video so far, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Story 4. I don't work in HR, but I have been reprimanded by them. I did a stint of work for Habitat for Humanity, helping low-income folks with repairing their falling down houses. Our Habitat for Humanity office was in a big warehouse. The front half of the warehouse had drop ceilings and typical cubicles, while the back half was an open warehouse for storing paint, supplies, tools, ladders, etc., etc. Oh, and this was in the northern Midwest, so winters up there were cold. This figures into the story in a moment. So one week, I came in and was told that we'd be replacing some interior doors at a house. Sure, no problem. We drive out to the house, get a look at the doors to be replaced, take some measurements, pick up a couple of doors from the big orange square repair store. However, these doors came unstained, and I needed to stain this door dark and put some polyurethane on it to protect it from scratches or dirtying other stuff. Fortunately, my partner and I have this big back warehouse area to work in. We prop the doors up on some sawhorses, open the wood stain, and slap it on there. Let it dry, buff it down, stain it again to get it dark enough. So far, so good. But then we came to the polyurethane. For anyone who hasn't used polyurethane, this stuff has some serious chemical fumes. This is the kind of stuff that kids sniff if they've only got $8 to last them from here to permanent brain damage. Sticky, flammable, and with powerful fumes, the perfect combination. So my partner and I popped the cans open and slathered the stuff on. Dimly aware that the fumes might grow concentrated in this back area, we set up a couple of box fans to blow the air away from this back corner of the warehouse. With both doors covered in a heavy layer of polyurethane and needing to dry, we grabbed some paint that had to be delivered to a job site and headed out in our truck. When we came back, we found the office in chaos. Apparently, all the fumes of the polyurethane had risen up in the warehouse, thanks to the fans, and then slowly crept down through the drop ceiling into the front half where all the office drones worked. Pretty soon, the entire building stank to high heaven of oil-based solvent fumes. In the end, half the workers had to go home early, and my partner and I received a stern talking to from HR about not putting stains or polyurethane on objects inside our building. Now, before anyone panics, this was a big warehouse where we did the staining. Sure, the smell spread throughout the building, but there were more than enough airspace for the fumes to dissipate. But the next morning, the smell was gone. There was no way for the fumes to have grown concentrated enough to hurt anyone. Story 5. Throwaway because, obviously, this isn't really conversation, but still one of my favorite stories. I worked at a rehab doing HR. I was starting some new hire paperwork with this lady who had just come downstairs from her second interview with the CEO. As I was looking through her interview paperwork and resume, noting she had been unemployed for 2 years prior, I told her we were going to do paperwork, urine test, and fingerprinting. She immediately stated she couldn't stick around to do paperwork as she had to go to her current job. Odd. Normally, rescheduling isn't an issue. We just have them urine test and then let them go handle their business as they aren't usually aware that they're due to paperwork immediately after being offered the job. And 9 times out of 10, they decide they can stick around and complete the paperwork after they test. Because 9 out of 10 times, they're trying to avoid pissing dirty. Of course, that's what she did. Throughout the paperwork, she was acting nervous, kind of bouncing around in her seat, cutting me off when I was explaining certain forms, etc. I told my supervisor to keep an eye out for her test results. A couple days later, I came back with the highest level for snow I have ever seen. And I used to watch parolees piss in cups right in front of me. I didn't get to sit in on this conversation, but what was reported back to me is that she was so excited for the second interview and potential employee, she had gone out of the night before and blew her sobriety on snow and was still going strong during paperwork. Alright, so what the heck goes through people's minds when they do these kinds of things? Hey Greg, I just got a job at a rehab center. I got a bag full of the Peruvian nose candy and I need to snort it off. Are you free in an hour? What? No, I don't see anything ironic about this. Story 6. This occurred at a multi-billion-dollar company and the executives involved are somewhat well known in the media. I worked at a tech company that was in the multi-year process of transferring engineering to an offshore contracting company. For this offshore company, the account was very large, so they had a VP/director guy there to make sure things went smoothly. Either way, I would be out of a job, so I would very aggressively call him out on his crap publicly. The engineers nicknamed him Lex Luthor because I could defeat him in battle, but I could never end him. I say this because I only remember him as Lex Luthor. So Lex Luthor was overtly flirtatious with the female employee from QA. She was always visibly uncomfortable with it. One late night in the office, Lex Luthor went to that poor girl. The girl reported this horrible incident to HR. At this point, the details are not 100% clear. However, the girl was no longer working there after she reported the incident. The CEO made a decision to quote-unquote pay her off or intimidate her not to file a police report or sue. Not sure exactly what happened to her though. The CEO did not want to ruin the relationship with the offshore companies, so they had Lex Luthor work from home. The logic was that he could not do that to anyone over the phone or email, and at this point the executives thought they had covered the sub. But in the following days, there was a large 30-people engineering meeting. Lex Luthor was on the phone. An engineer presented an idea and Lex Luthor fired back with a competing idea. One of the engineering directors snidely sided with Lex Luthor. Then the engineer retorted with, "At least I didn't mistreat anybody." The room went silent and the meeting ended right there. The cover-up was no longer covered up. Shortly after, the chief people officer was so disgusted with the incident and the CEO's intervention on a clear HR issue that she left the company. The company continued with their offshoring efforts, though. Hold on, wait a minute. So, was there a clear winner or loser in all of this? Sounds like an unfortunate stalemate. A few won and a few lost. Story 7. I had a new team member ask me if it was okay if she and her husband tried to have a baby. The gist of it was she was scared that she would lose her job if she got pregnant since she was relatively new to the company. Long and the short of it was her grandma had raised her and she wanted her grandmother to be around when she had her first child and knew that holding off would make that less and less likely. That was probably the most awkward conversation I've had with someone just due to the responsibility and power that she was putting in my hands. The answer was easy, of course, but still I felt really strange about the whole thing. I've had the smelling employee conversation. I've addressed every performance issue, dealt with tons of the excuses that range from standard to what the hell are you thinking? The conversation I had with her left me dumbfounded for a few ticks. Story 8. Not HR, but a relevant HR screw-up story. This happened maybe 6 months ago. I am a low-ranking hourly employee at a national chain company. However, I essentially do the work of an assistant manager. As a result, I had access to pretty much every account and password of my manager since he would ask me to perform certain duties that he didn't feel like doing. One of those is the email for our branch. Now, occasionally, I would log into the email when I was bored to check on messages from corporate and from members, and since I'd sometimes have to deal with those issues the next day anyway. One day, I noticed a particular email from HR. It detailed in length a situation between the regional manager, one of 2 or 3 in the entire company, a general manager, and several regular employees. The regional manager had blatantly pestered several female employees and demanded a manager to fire another employee for being trans, and he didn't want it to be representing his company. The message also detailed certain illegal activities being done using company channels that were known to the regional manager. There was a second email in the inbox that essentially said, "We don't know how HR accidentally sent this, but delete it and disregard it." I was extremely tempted to copy the entire email and save it as a trump card if I ever needed it. Shortly after, every manager in the company was required to go through SH policy training. Every employee at my work would comment that it was SH when someone said or did anything that could be interpreted with a twist in any way. Once, sometimes twice a year, that regional manager will stop by my location. It's almost worth getting fired to ask him why he's giving me crap since I'm not even trans, since he always complains to everyone, almost. Story 9. Not in HR, but had plenty of awkward interactions. My favorite? I spoke to my supervisor regarding my title. I was called a sales support engineer. as my coworkers did the same projects, etc., as me but had a different title, structural engineer. Head of HR said, "Since we are owned by a Spanish company, titles are unimportant. We are all the same." I brought up a few points as to why that was a bad answer, and the conversation basically fizzled out. A few days later, a new phone organizational chart was distributed and all job titles had been removed. For a good week or so, customers would call in, and our customer service reps, who seemed to be replaced on a weekly basis, would flat out tell people, "I have no idea who to transfer you to." Outside of this, my catalytic converter was cut out of my car one day, and she told me, "Those fall out all the time. When I started working here, mine did." I'm very glad I don't work there anymore. Alright, wait, hold on. She was honestly trying to tell this guy that catalytic converters just fell off of cars? Well, if you like these stories, here's a few more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thank you for watching this one.